Hey guys, welcome to episode number 576. Today is Monday, so it's Update Monday. And today we are doing another full fish room tour down here in the basement, Greg's Fish Room. It's been a while since we've done one of these, so I thought it would be nice to give you guys an update on what's going on. And as the title suggests, I am considering a major renovation to this fish room. So stay tuned towards the end of the video to hear what my plans are for that. Alright guys, so let's jump into this video so we can take a look at what's been going on. Now, first thing is the Turtle-matic feeder. This is an automatic turtle feeder, as the name would suggest, and it's actually worked out pretty well. I filled the hopper a few weeks ago, and just a little while ago it ran out of pellets, so I turned it off. So far I'm pretty happy with it. I am going to get a container of food and screw that onto the top and see if it performs just as well with that, but no complaints there. Our stock tank is looking a little dirty. This usually happens at the end of the winter time. It just gets completely cruddy. Especially on the bottom. It's a little tough to siphon a stock tank like this that's so close to the ground. So usually what I do in the fall and in the spring is I completely tear apart everything in the turtle stock tank. I wash the sand outdoors, I allow the driftwood to sort of dry out, and then I place everything back together. That is a process that takes about 12 hours. So it's something that I'll probably have to do over the weekend, and hopefully I can get that accomplished soon. Otherwise, the turtle stock tank is doing really well. All of these turtles, though, these black knob map turtles, they love to hide. So wherever they feel that they're the safest is where they decide to hide. Which doesn't make for very good video content. I might need to find a way to make a couple caves so they can spread themselves out over the stock tank itself, and maybe something that I could put a GoPro down a little bit easier. But for right now, they've got some Malaysian driftwood, some very large pieces of Malaysian driftwood as sort of a makeshift cave, and they seem pretty happy down there. I have picked these guys up before in past videos to sort of walk through all the males and the females that I have in there. So go check out those videos if you want. But these guys are doing really well. I actually have a number of fish in here and a number of crayfish in here, and they seem to be chowing down on those. And there's basically an endless supply of that, plus turtle pellets. So that is the 300-gallon Rubbermaid turtle stock tank. Now, feeding off of the filtration of this stock tank is my wall-mounted fry rack, and this thing has given me a little bit of trouble in the past. I've got it dialed in now, so it's working pretty well. There's only one problem, and that problem comes from the fact that the water in this filtration barrel isn't the cleanest. Turtles are pretty messy. This is my mechanical barrel, and there's a lot of junk and debris that settles in that barrel, and any of that gets pumped into this system then clogs these drip lines really quickly. So usually once a week I just have to you see the little valves up here? I have to kick those full on so that a stream of water jets out of those little drip emitters to clear any of the gunk and debris that's clogged up in those. Otherwise, the flow rate will reduce over time, and as you can see, there is quite a bit of debris in the bottoms of these tanks, but I literally just got done filling these back up, cleaning these and filling these back up. So the debris that you're seeing is all of the stuff that was stuck in the lines from these drip emitters and the tubing itself. So I think what I'm going to do is actually convert this mangrove tank potentially into its own sump tank and install a filter in here, and maybe like some filter socks in here, some very fine filtration, and then a return pump, and pump the water from this sump up into this rack to make sure that the water that goes in here is as clean as possible so it doesn't clog up those lines. That's been a little bit of an issue for me, and it sort of held me back from putting anything too important in these containers. What I do have primarily are a lot of marbled crayfish, and there's actually quite a few of these that are carrying eggs. As you guys may know, marbled crayfish, mama crabs, are also called self-cloning crayfish because they are all females and they don't need to mate in order to have eggs. So lots of them with eggs on this rack. And the one thing that's actually missing from this rack are the PVC pipes that I place in each one of these containers to allow them to have a hiding place. Those are actually still in the sink. Got to clean those out and return those to these tanks. But they do really well in these marina hang-on breeder boxes. These are the large breeder boxes, and if you go check out past videos, you can see how I constructed this rack and how I set it all up. Pretty happy with it. I just have to work out that fine filtration issue, and this system should be up to full speed. I'm also considering putting some sort of like LED strip lighting underneath each shelf so that I can get a little bit better lighting on these, but I am getting some algae growth as well, especially on these tanks in the lower corner here that are getting more of the light from the turtle tank. So I may need to swap out, when I swap out the crayfish for like, you know, live bearers or something, if I've got like a pregnant angler or swordtail or something like that, I may also throw in a baby bristlenose pleco to keep some of the algae down. But that is the wall-mounted fry rack. The mangroves themselves down here in the 50-gallon Rubbermaid, they're not doing so hot. We do have a number of fiddler crabs still in here. They're doing just fine. But if we look at some of these mangroves, you can see that some are certainly alive. Like this one has a nice green tip. If I was to pull this out of the sand substrate, you would see it's got a lot of nice roots and rootlets. So this one will certainly survive and thrive. It's just been really slow going down here. And the ones that are dead are the ones that have sort of this black top. The ones that are all shriveled up and have the black tips to them will not make it. So there are some green ones in here. Like there's another one here. And there's another one back here. But by and large, a lot of these actually did not make it, which is kind of too bad. These were the leftover ones from a My Aquarium box way back in the fall, and they were actually left out for probably a week or two, and they were like the rejects. All the good ones went in the My Aquarium boxes, and these are the ones that I held back because they weren't the best. So for whatever reason, some of them were either damaged or I just didn't like the way they looked. So they ended up here. A few of them may survive. I may transfer them to the turtle tank when I renovate this 50-gallon stock tank into a proper sump for the fry rack. So that's the story down there. Again, this system is kind of difficult to clean because it is so close to the ground, and when I renovate this thing, I'm just going to toss out all the sand and all the dead mangroves, and I'll just keep the fiddler crabs and the few mangroves that are alive, and we'll see where that goes. So that's a future project, but not for today. Now, moving over into our fish rack. This is the 40-gallon breeder fish rack. We've got a number of different species. This tank had a bunch of Mexican mollies from like a year ago, and they didn't do so well. I do have one big female that's left in the back, and I may have 1 or 2 juveniles still in here as well, and I don't know if the female will drop any more fry. So we'll see how she does in here. I think for mollies, I should probably set them up in a tank that has some salt content. I do know they like that, they do prefer that, and maybe, you know, the water just wasn't right for them. But you know, as things go, sometimes you lose sight of a colony and it dwindles to the point where it's not recoverable. So unfortunately, that's the situation with the mollies. However, we do have a number of anglers that have made their way into this tank, as you can see, and they're doing just fine. And we also have a number of cory cats in here, and the small, you see the 2 small albino cory cats, those are actually babies that I grew from eggs from this batch. Actually, there's a 3rd one back there too, so that's pretty cool. There is at least 1 pleco in here, and I probably have to remove him because I think what he's doing is he's eating all of the eggs that the cory cats are laying. So I do want to try to raise some more cory cat, and in doing that I need to remove the pleco. Anyways, that's that tank. Up here we've got some Amica splendens. These are a lot of fun. I wasn't sure how these guys were going to do, and to my surprise, they've done pretty well. They do get a little bit aggressive towards each other, the males do. So I do have a lot of cover in here, some plastic plants, and I wasn't sure if they were going to eat their babies or not, and I believe they do that as well. But as you can see, we've got a number of juveniles in here, and they are of various sizes. There's one. There's some more. There's another one. So we are raising these things in this tank, along with, you guessed it, some more antlers. But yeah, I think this colony is going to do just fine. They're sort of holding their own right now, and I haven't noticed any die-off at all from these guys, and I've had half of this group for the entire winter, and the other half is just recent. So hopefully when all these babies start growing out, I'll have a nice strong colony of Amica splendens, and hopefully I'll be able to bring some to some future auctions to give away, which would be pretty cool. My antler colony, as always, is thriving. There's really no way to kill these guys, and they're doing really well. There is quite a bit of mulm at the bottom of this tank. Most of this actually came from the fake plants. As I was washing the fake plants, there's a bunch of crap that fell off, and I think most of that just accumulated on the bottom. So this is like 1 day of waste from this tank, which after you clean tanks, it's not nice to see that much waste accumulate. So it's a constant battle. But in the back, you will see we do have a baby bristlenose pleco. You just swam away. What I've tried to do is put at least 1 pleco in every one of these 40-gallon tanks, just to try to keep the glass a little bit cleaner, and it is working out pretty well. So that's the antler tank. Plenty of color in there. And you guys may notice the theme. I do like a lot of wild fish and live bears. I just like the way that they look. Down here we have a ton of bristlenose plecos. This is where most of them are. You won't be able to see many of them, but there's probably at least a couple dozen in here. And some of them are albinos, some of them are regulars, and if you see the little babies swimming around on the bottom, and some of them are on the glass. It's not going to focus very well. We are breeding these guys too, which is nice to see. all it takes is enough males and females together and enough caves. And I do have 4 ceramic caves in here. So I guess at least 1 or 2 pairs have decided to lay some eggs, and they've hatched successfully, which is always nice to see. Now, I feed these guys a mixture of algae wafers and green beans and cucumbers and zucchini and summer squash and all kinds of stuff, the remnants of which you can sort of see down here in this pile. And if you look close, you can see there's some moving, there's some wiggling. The little babies are still chowing down on yesterday's meal. So nothing goes to waste in this tank for sure. And I'm super happy that this colony has started to breed. I got plenty of big Malaysian driftwood in there with lots of hiding spaces. Obviously plecos don't like a lot of light, and they do like to hide. So that is that. That is this side of the fish room. Let's go take a look at what's going on the other side. Now, one of the things I mentioned, I believe the last time I did a fish room tour, was this little experiment, and it's actually worked out really well. I've got a few goldfish in here. These were actually babies last fall, so this is how much they've grown out over the winter. And once the water warms up in the pond, I'll put these guys out in the pond with the rest of the goldfish. But as you'll notice, there's not a whole lot in this tank, and there's not a whole lot of debris on the bottom of the tank either. And I attribute most of that to this overflow that I've created. It is an airlift style overflow. So a lot of the tanks just have the black plastic part there, which is just an overflow screen to make sure that all of the debris gets stuck on that and doesn't go down to your overflow. What I've done is I've attached a T and a PVC pipe down to the bottom, and then I've put an air stone with an air line down the middle. It goes all the way down the middle of the tube, and what it does is it pulls all of the air and debris and everything else that's in this tank from the bottom here. It pulls it all the way up just like an airlift, just like a sponge filter, and that's what exits the overflow. So the water level in this tank is a little bit lower than it would normally be if this was a gravity drain. But the advantage is a lot of the debris that's just sort of getting kicked up by these goldfish as they swim around, all that stuff that remains near the bottom but still floating, that actually gets sucked up through the bottom here and then carried out over the overflow. So that's working out really well. I might adapt that and do this on a lot more of my tanks in the future because it is working out so well. And the bonus is I always have a backup, so the emergency overflow becomes this screen here. So for whatever reason the tube down below gets clogged up, the water level rises, it can still go through that screen there. So that's working out really well. The goldfish have done really well down here. As you can see, they've like quadrupled in size since I put them in here in the fall, and they'll be right at home out in the pond. Once it warms up a little bit, it's still pretty cold at night. All right, next tank. This is crazy. This is what happens when you have a self-cloning crayfish colony. These are all marbled crayfish, marmot crabs. They're the same ones that are in my wall-mounted fry rack. This is just a 40-gallon tank full of them, and it's absolutely crazy. They just cover every surface here. They're inside all of these coconuts. They're walking on the tops. There's driftwood in there. There's all kinds of stuff in there, and they're just all over the place. They just reproduce like crazy. They are cannibals, but they aren't super aggressive towards each other. And they do have relatively small claws for the size of the crayfish, which means they're a lot more likely to escape if they're getting attacked. So you don't often find them missing claws, and you don't often find them getting eaten by each other because they are able to escape pretty well. But this tank is chock full of crayfish. Every auction I go to, I make sure to bring crayfish in here because they just reproduce basically out of control. So that's the bottom tank here. I am looking to potentially get rid of all of the crayfish in my fish rack. I'm sort of sick of the crayfish taking up so much space. I do have them in the fry rack. I do have them in here. I've got more wild type crayfish in here, and as you can see, like, again, they're just all over the place. So there's really no way to put live plants in any of these crayfish tanks. The crayfish will just eat them. There's really no way to keep a healthy population of fish, even though you see a few swimming around, because the crayfish will eat the fish. So the tank just sort of looks kind of boring and full of crayfish. So I am getting a little tired of them, even though they are cool. I may keep one tank dedicated to crayfish, but I do want to free up more space for more live bearers and more breeding colonies of fish. So it'll be good when the goldfish move outside. I'll get a tank there, and maybe these guys will go to auction the next time I have a chance, and I'll get another free tank there. Down here, our final tank, we have one fish that I am super excited to work with, and that is the Montezuma swordtail. These guys are like a wild type swordtail. They've got a red line down the middle of their body, and they've got sort of this speckled pattern on them. And the males have a nice long sword that's got like a black and a yellow bar to it. And they're just cool fish. I mean, I like anglers, I like guppies, I like mollies, I like swordtails. They're all a little bit different, but they do have a lot of similarities as well. Swordtails, again, they're a little bit more aggressive towards each other. So I do have quite a bit of plant matter there. And this colony is probably about maxed out for this amount of space. So I may end up dividing this colony in half, actually, putting some of the females, the hit females, in the wall-mounted fry rack to try to get more fry, and then split this colony in half and use 2 tanks for these fish. I do think they're cool, and I'm really looking forward to getting some fry from these guys. Very cool pickup that I got from the Tropical Fish Society of Rhode Island. You guys don't go to your local auctions, you definitely should. This was just one thing that I picked up there, and this will give me at least a couple years of enjoyment for breeding these things, growing them out and giving them to other people, because that's what half the fun is all about. All right, what do we got over here? These are our Daphnia cultures. There are still Daphnia in here. If we zoom in, you can see the little critters bumping around. It's going to be hard to focus. There's just not enough light, and this camera is not really meant to do this. But this is a good one. You can see them there in the corner. Quite a few, but not nearly as many as I started with. Essentially, what I've been doing is every day or two, I've been feeding just a little bit of spirulina powder, dried spirulina powder, into each of these 2 cultures. I've maintained 2 cultures just in case one decides to crash on me, and I drain half of the water every other day into a bucket, and I've actually been carrying those 5-gallon buckets as they get full. I've been carrying those out to my pond, which is actually full of algae right now. So hopefully some of those Daphnia survive out in the pond, and I'll just have like a killer Daphnia colony out there once the weather warms up. I know they're a little temperature intolerant, but they also do live in this area. So I'm hopeful that they'll be able to hang on, and with the abundance of algae out there, they should do really well. So that's about it. We do have some plants up here on the plant rack, which will hopefully be moving outdoors into the greenhouse sooner rather than later, because spring is here. I've got a lot of planting that I need to do of seeds, and I've got a lot of maintenance to do out in the greenhouse and out in the pond to prepare all of that for the summer. I'm super excited to get outdoors, super excited to grow and breed fish outside in the greenhouse, out in the 1,000-gallon pond behind the greenhouse. It's going to be a ton of fun. I may get some goldfish in to fill out the pond. We'll see. I gotta clean up that pond and see how the fish are doing before I decide to do anything. I want to see how they did over the winter. I may need to bring them in over the winter. Hopefully they all survived and they're doing well out there, but only time will tell. Anyways, guys, that is a tour of the fish room in its entirety. Now, let's briefly talk about one thing that I have been thinking about for a very long time. And it's something that may drastically change the look of this fish room. I have this idea, and the idea is to completely tear down basically the entire fish room. All of the racks, all of the tanks, yes, even the stock tank, potentially, and start over. And the reason is because I want to try a different type of tank. These 40-gallon tanks have done really well. They're still probably my favorite all-purpose tank, but what I really want to test out is the Zoomed Lowboy tanks. If you haven't seen those, they've been out for a number of years now. People use them a lot for fragging because it is a 4-foot by 2-foot by 10-inch tall tank. And in comparison, these 40-gallon breeders, they're only 3 feet and they're not as deep, but they are taller. So I believe what I can do is fit 4 50-gallon lowboys along this back wall, and I can stack them 3 levels tall, and that will give me basically the same equivalent gallons for my fish system and my 300-gallon stock tank combined, but it will be against one wall of this basement, and it will be a little bit more compact and better contained. There are a number of things that I want to do in that system to make the drainage better, to make siphoning tanks easier, to make the return plumbing easier and the air lines easier, and just everything that I've learned from this system. This fish room has been set up for 5 years now, and there have been plenty of projects along the way, but a lot of what's here, if you go back and look at my channel, a lot of what's here is pretty similar to the way it started out. And I think it's time for a change. I don't know if this is going to happen for certain, and I don't know when it will happen, but I do really want to try out the 50-gallon Zoomed Lowboy tanks, and I think a whole wall full of those would look absolutely amazing. What would I put in them? Well, I would certainly keep all of my turtles. I would certainly keep all of my colonies of live bearers. A 50-gallon lowboy tank has a lot of similar properties to stock tanks and 40-gallon breeder tanks in that they have a lot of surface area, even more surface area. And the thing that doesn't really matter for a whole lot of fish is the water height. If you're breeding things like discus and angels, yes, the height of the water absolutely matters. Like big cichlids, yes, height matters. But with a lot of smaller fish, a lot of colony breeding fish, and things like crayfish and plecos and turtles and plecostomus and aquatic newts and a lot of things that I'm interested in, more surface area means more fish, higher density, better results. So that's what I'm thinking. And I think with everything that I know from setting up this fish room, I think I can make it really awesome. And yeah, that's the vision. That's the dream. So it's not an April Fool's thing. This is something that I've been thinking about for a long time. It's not clickbait. It is real. It's something that I've had in the back of my head. I've got the design. I've laid it all out on, you know, the computer. And I know it's something that is absolutely possible. Question is, will it happen? I guess you have to stick around and find out. But for now, this is the fish room. Nice and clean, tucked in, ready for bed. Hope you guys enjoyed. And I'll see you guys later.